nations born from the same womb of colonial rule. One land divided by faith, drenched in the blood of millions. For over 7 decades, India and Pakistan have stood as nuclear-armed adversaries, locked in one of history's most dangerous and protracted conflicts.
This is not merely a border dispute, it's a clash of national identities, territorial ambitions, and geopolitical gambits that has shaped the destiny of over 1/5 of humanity. Today, we unravel the twisted threads of the India-Pakistan conflict, a saga of partition, war, terrorism, and nuclear brinkmanship that continues to cast its long shadow over South Asia and the world.
India versus Pakistan. Sounds like a simple question, right? But this story goes back thousands of years, long before 1947 when British India was split into two nations. What followed was incredible. The first Kashmir War in 1947, another war in 1965, Bangladesh breaking away in 1971, both countries going nuclear in 1998, and the Kargil conflict in 1999 that brought two nuclear powers to the brink. From 2000 to today, this tension continues to reshape global politics. This is the only video you'll need to understand it all.
India-Pakistan conflict, blood, borders, and betrayal. Act 1. The Birth of Nations, 1947 to 1965.
August 14, 1947, the stroke of midnight after 2 centuries of colonial rule, the British Empire's crown jewel was split into 2 independent nations, Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. What was meant to be a moment of triumph and liberation instead unleashed one of history's largest mass migrations and communal bloodbaths.
Between 10 and 20 million people were forcibly displaced. Up to 2 million were slaughtered in religiously motivated violence. But amid this chaos of birth, another conflict was already brewing. One that would define the relationship between these sibling nations for generations to come.
As British rule collapsed, the 565 princely states that constituted about 1/3 of the subcontinent faced a choice: join India or Pakistan. In the northern territory of Jammu and Kashmir, a critical strategic crossroads with a Muslim majority population but a Hindu ruler. This decision would ignite the first spark in a 75-year inferno.
In October 1947, Pakistani tribesmen invaded Kashmir, pushing towards the capital of Srinagar. The panicked Hindu ruler Maharaja Hari Singh signed an instrument of accession to India in exchange of military aid. Indian troops airlifted into the region pushed back Pakistani forces, but not before they had seized roughly 1/3 of Kashmir's territory.
By January 1949, a UN-brokered ceasefire established the line of control, dividing Kashmir between India and Pakistan administration. The UN resolution called for a plebiscite, allowing Kashmiris to determine their own future, a vote that has never taken place. This unresolved status created a territorial wound that refuses to heal, becoming the festering core of the India-Pakistan conflict.
The next major clash came in 1965. After a border skirmish in Run of Kutch earlier that year, Pakistan launched Operation Gibraltar. In August, infiltrating soldiers disguised as locals into Indian-administered Kashmir to foment rebellion, leading to a 3-week war fought along both the Kashmir border and international frontier.
Neither side gained significant territory, and Soviet mediation led to the Tashkent Declaration in 1966. But the conflict hardened positions on both sides and established a dangerous pattern: unresolved grievances followed by military confrontations, followed by external intervention, without addressing the fundamental issues driving the conflict.
Act 2. War. The birth of Bangladesh, 1966 to 1980s. While Kashmir remained the primary flashpoint, the greatest transformation in the subcontinent's geopolitical landscape emerged from within Pakistan itself. By 1970, frustrations in East Pakistan over political marginalization, economic exploitation, and cultural suppression by West Pakistan had reached a breaking point.
March 1971, Pakistani's military launched brutal crackdown to crush the Bengali independence movement. What followed was a campaign of systematic atrocities that sent 10 million refugees fleeing into India. For India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, this presented both a humanitarian crisis and strategic opportunity.
In December 1971, India intervened militarily. Within just 13 days, Indian forces supported by Bengali freedom fighters forced the surrender of 93,000 Pakistani troops. East Pakistan became the independent nation of Bangladesh, and Pakistan suffered a humiliating dismemberment that would fuel its security anxieties and military doctrine for decades to come.
The 1972 Simla Agreement formalized the ceasefire line in Kashmir as a line of control and committed both countries to resolve their differences peacefully through bilateral negotiations. But beneath the diplomatic niceties, a fundamental transformation was underway in how this conflict would be fought.
1974, India conducted its first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. Though described as a peaceful nuclear explosion, the message was clear. India was now a nuclear power. Pakistan's Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto reportedly vowed that Pakistanis would eat grass if necessary to develop their own nuclear weapons, a goal they would pursue relentlessly for the next 2 decades.
Even as the specter of nuclear competition loomed, conventional conflict continued. In 1984, India launched Operation Meghadoot, seizing control of the strategic Siachen Glacier in northern Kashmir, the world's highest battlefield. This remote frozen contest would claim more lives through extreme conditions than combat, yet neither side would relinquish what had become a symbol of national resolve.
By the late 1980s, a new and more insidious phase of the conflict was emerging. An indigenous uprising against Indian rule erupted in Kashmir, initially driven by allegations of rigged elections and political suppression, but what began as largely secular movement for self-determination would soon be co-opted by more radical elements with direct implications for how Pakistan would wage its forever war against India.
Act 3, The Age of Terror, 1990s. As the Cold War ended globally, a new type of proxy conflict was heating up in the South Asia. The Kashmiri insurgency provided Pakistan with an opportunity to bleed India through what military strategists call death by 1,000 cuts, supporting militant groups that could inflict damage while maintaining plausible deniability.
Among the most prominent groups to emerge was Lashkar-e-Taiba, founded around 1990 by Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, with alleged backing from Pakistan's inter-services intelligence. Unlike earlier Kashmir-focused groups, LET embraced a border Islamist agenda aimed at establishing Islamic rule across the Indian subcontinent.
Another key figure was Masood Azhar, who would gain his freedom in December 1999 when an Indian airliner was hijacked to Afghanistan. To secure the release of 155 hostages, India was forced to free Azhar along with the 2 other militants. Azhar would go on to found Jaish-e-Mohammed, responsible for some of the deadliest attacks on the Indian soil.
These groups did not operate in isolation. Evidence suggests connections between anti-India terrorist organization and the border jihadist network, including Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden reportedly maintained links with LET and may have been involved in planning attacks against India. Notably, the father of Pakistan's Director General of Inter-Services Public Relations had documented ties to bin Laden, illustrating the complex web connecting Pakistan's military establishment to extremist networks.
Against this backdrop of escalating proxy warfare, both countries crossed the nuclear threshold. In May 1998, India conducted 5 nuclear tests. Pakistan responded within weeks with 6 tests of its own. The subcontinent had officially become a nuclear flashpoint, fundamentally altering the strategic calculus of the conflict.
Just 1 year later, this new nuclear reality was put into test. In early 1999, Pakistani forces and the militants secretly infiltrated across the line of control, occupying strategic heights in the Kargil district of Indian-controlled Kashmir. When India discovered the incursion in May, it launched a massive counter-offensive to reclaim the territory.
The Kargil War marked the first direct military confrontation between nuclear-armed adversaries in history. Under intense international pressure, particularly from the United States, Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif agreed to withdraw forces in July. The war demonstrated both the continued willingness of 2 nations to risk conventional conflict and the new constraints imposed by their nuclear capabilities. Act 4, Nuclear Brinkmanship, 2000 to 2010. The new millennium began with an audacious terrorist strike at the heart of Indian democracy. On December 13, 2001, 5 terrorists breached security at the Indian Parliament complex in New Delhi, killing 9 people before being neutralized by security forces. India immediately blamed the Pakistan-based groups Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed.
In response, India launched Operation Parakram, mobilizing over 500,000 troops along the border with Pakistan in the largest military buildup since the 1971 war. Pakistan responded with its own mobilization. For 10 months, the world watched as 2 nuclear-armed nations stood on the precipice of all-out war.
The crisis eventually de-escalated under intense international pressure, and in 2003, both sides agreed to the ceasefire along the line of control. This period of relative calm allowed for the brief thaw in relations, with increased people-to-people contacts and cross-border trade initiatives, but the underlying dynamics of the conflict remained unchanged.
In February 2007, the Samjhauta Express, a train service connecting India and Pakistan, was bombed near Panipat, India, killing 68 people, mostly Pakistani citizens. Investigations into this attack have been complex and controversial, with different theories about responsibility.
But the most devastating terrorist attack of the decade occurred in November 2008, when 10 LET operatives launched a coordinated assault on multiple targets in Mumbai, India's financial capital. Over 4 days, they killed 166 people and wounded more than 300. The attackers were in constant communication with their handlers in Pakistan, including Shajid Mir, a key LET operative who directed the carnage in real time.
India provided extensive evidence linking the attack to LET and by extension to Pakistan's security establishment. Hafiz Saeed, despite being designated as a global terrorist, continued to operate openly in Pakistan. Sajid Mir's case proved particularly revealing. Pakistan initially denied his very existence, only to later acknowledge his detention under international pressure. For India, this pattern of denial, followed by minimal action against terrorist leaders, confirmed Pakistan's duplicitous approach to terrorism.
Act 5 New Patterns of Conflict 2011 to 2025. The relatively stable ceasefire period ended in 2010 as a new cycle of terrorist attacks and military response emerged. In September 2016, militants attacked an Indian army base in Uri, Kashmir, killing 19 soldiers. India responded with what is called surgical strikes across the line of control, targeting terrorist launch pads in Pakistan-controlled territory, signaling a more aggressive posture under Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
In 2019, a Jaish-e-Mohammed suicide bomber killed over 40 Indian paramilitary personnel in Pulwama, Kashmir. India's response marked a significant escalation. Airstrikes on an alleged JEM training camp in Balakot, deep inside undisputed Pakistani territory. The following day, an aerial dogfight resulted in the drowning of an Indian fighter jet and the capture of its pilot, who was later released by Pakistan in a gesture of de-escalation.
In August 2019, India fundamentally altered the status quo by revoking Article 370 of its constitution, which had granted special autonomous status to Jammu and Kashmir. This unilateral action, accompanied by a security lockdown and communications blackout in Kashmir, was celebrated in India as completing national integration but denounced by Pakistan as illegal annexation.
The month of April 2025 witnessed a brutal attack of terror in our own Kashmir. In the serene valley of Pahalgam, 26 innocent tourists became victims of a cowardly attack. The responsibility claimed by the so-called the Resistance Front. But we and the world know this is merely a mask of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, a desperate attempt by Pakistan to deflect the global gaze from their continued sponsorship of terror. This barbarity could not and would not go unanswered. India's response was swift, decisive and resolute. Operation Sindoor. On May 7, our armed forces precise strikes 9 identified terror havens deep within Pakistani territory and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Our message was clear. Harboring terrorists come at a heavy price. What the world witnessed was the impenetrable shield of India's air defense. Any attempt by Pakistan to retaliate was met with an iron wall. Their aircraft dared to breach our skies. Their artillery shells attempted to find their mark. But within minutes, within hours, our indomitable air defense systems neutralized every threat. The precision, the speed, the absolute dominance displayed by the Indian Air Force sent shockwave across the globe. Nations watched in awe as India demonstrated its capability to safeguard its skies with unparalleled efficiency. Following intense diplomatic efforts, primarily spearheaded by the United States, a ceasefire was declared on May 10. India, always committed to peace, agreed to this de-escalation, but this gesture of goodwill was met with treachery. Pakistan, in its characteristic duplicity, cunningly used the ceasefire as a smokescreen. They violated the agreement, launching further attacks, revealing their insidious intentions to the world. This betrayal underscores the reality that the fundamental issue of cross-border terrorism, nurtured and supported by Pakistan, remains a festering wound. Despite the repeated betrayals and the persistent threat of terrorism emanating from across the border, India remains vigilant. Our commitment to protecting our citizens and our sovereignty is unwavering. The world has seen the strength of our resolve, the prowess of our defense capabilities, and the duplicitous nature of our neighbor. As we navigate this complex and challenging landscape, India stands firm, ready to defend its honor and its people.
Act 6. Geopolitical Chessboard. To understand the persistence of the India-Pakistan conflict, we must examine the broader geopolitical chessboard on which it plays out. China's role is particularly significant. Its long-standing, all-weather friendship with Pakistan serves as strategic counterweight to India. China also administers a portion of Kashmir called Aksai Chin, adding a third nuclear power to the territorial dispute.
The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC), a massive infrastructure project, has further solidified this partnership. Running through disputed territories and culminating at the strategic Gwadar port, CPEC represents China's growing influence in the region and raises India's concern about strategic encirclement.
Meanwhile, the United States has increasingly aligned itself with India, particularly as a counterbalance to China's rise in Asia. This evolving strategic partnership has altered regional dynamics, with Pakistan viewing this growing alignment with suspicion and concern.
During the Cold War, these alignments were reversed. India leaned towards the Soviet Union while Pakistan was firmly in the American camp. These external relationships provided military aid, diplomatic support, and global context for what might otherwise have remained a regional dispute.
The nuclear dimension cannot be overstated. Both nations now possess substantial nuclear arsenals and deliver systems capable of reaching each other's territory within minutes. This creates a paradoxical situation where the threat of mutually assured destructions may prevent full-scale conventional war, but simultaneously enables lower-level conflict and terrorist actions under the nuclear umbrella.
Domestic politics further complicates the picture. Hardline nationalism, religious ideologies, and the political utility of having an external enemy all makes compromise difficult for leaders on both the sides. The Kashmir issue in particular has become so intertwined with the national identity that any concession is portrayed as an existential threat.
Conclusion. For over 7 decades, the people of India and Pakistan have lived in the shadow of conflict that has consumed enormous resources, stunted economic cooperation, and periodically erupted into violence. What began as a territorial dispute has evolved into a multifaceted rivalry encompassing terrorism, nuclear brinkmanship, and great power competition.
The cycles of violence have established dangerous new patterns. Terrorist attacks trigger military responses which prompt counter-responses, all carefully calibrated to remain below the threshold of nuclear war, yet each round pushing that threshold slightly higher. Meanwhile, Kashmir remains divided, its people caught between militancy, military occupation, and unfulfilled aspirations.
As long as Kashmir remains disputed, as long as terrorist groups find safe havens, as long as national identities are defined in opposition to each other, and as long as external powers pursue their own strategic interest in the region, the India-Pakistan conflict will likely endure. For two nations born from the same land, the borders between them remain not just lines on a map, but wounds that refuse to heal, continually reopened by blood, politics, and betrayal.